Detention fees are one of the least known expenses at the C-suite, and it's costing companies millions of dollars per year. So in this video, I'm going to break down exactly what went wrong, how things could have spun out of control, and what was put in place to solve detention once and for all. I've spent 23 years traveling the world, seeing logistics inside and out, from small facilities to mega facilities within the US to Saudi Arabia, you name it. And what I can tell you, this story is not unique to this one company. It happens day in and day out. Where there's facility operations, we see congestion and friction, and that means opportunity. So let me set the scene for you. This is a multi-billion-dollar leading food manufacturer. If you walk down the frozen food aisle, you'd know exactly who this is. What was going on? Well, at the highest level, this one site was leaking over $1.5 million in detention cost. It was a distribution center and a manufacturing plant combined. It was over 500,000 square feet just in the warehouse alone. So that one warehouse, they have both inbound and outbound freight. So they had 75 doors on the inbound side, they had 90 doors on the outbound side. They average right around 150 outbound trucks per day and right around 50 inbound trucks. So those inbound trucks are bringing raw material and goods used for manufacturing. Those outbound trucks are delivering to retailers all across the US. They ship a mix of dry freight and reefer freight. So dry freight is freight that is in the trailer, does not need to be temperature controlled. Reefer freight is a refrigerated trailer. So some of the product has to be refrigerated temp, others has to be frozen. So all that is a constraint that the operation has to deal with. They run a large operation. They have about 3 spotters per shift that help move trailers around the property from their spaces into their doors. So what were the challenges that this facility had? It wasn't actually the detention cost that caught leadership's eye. What it was a Google review actually for their warehouse. It was a 1-star review by a driver that called out the fact that how long he had to wait just to get loaded. When leadership started to get involved, they noticed how often police actually had to be called every single day to help rally traffic. Unfortunately, this site did not have a long runway for trucks to park. So what would happen is as soon as there's congestion at the gate, that truck traffic would back up into a public road. So constantly police were called, especially during the peak times from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. So how did detention costs get that out of control? Let me start with defining what detention cost is. Detention ultimately is a fee paid to the driver or the trucking company for waiting time. Typically 2 hours free of waiting time. So if I have a 10 a.m. appointment, driver shows up at 9, the shot clock starts at 10. Anything after 12 p.m., the driver is paid a per hour fee that gets capped. Usually in the market, we see detention charges anywhere from $60 to $100 per hour, capped anywhere at $300 to $500 per day. There are limits that can occur, but ultimately it's a way to compensate drivers for lost revenue generating miles. So ultimately think of these truck drivers that you see on the road and ask yourself, are they hauling product? Because if they're not, they're likely not generating revenue. And if they're waiting at a site and they're not on the road, it hurts their pocket as well. One of the things we saw immediately at this location was the imbalance between live loads and drop loads. So a live load is when a driver comes in with their truck and trailer, they get loaded and they go on their merry way. So the driver has to wait the entire time. Drop trailers are when you have empty trailers located on site from a specific trucking company or multiple trucking companies, and it allows your team to load product throughout the night, and then the driver can come at any time, grab the load and go. One of the things we saw immediately is over 95% of the loads were live. Well, they had yard spotters, but ultimately there was a big disconnect between site operations and the corporate transportation team. In part, they didn't have data, they didn't have real-time visibility, and the metrics weren't consolidated in one place. Had that Google review never been posted, they might still be operating this way today. So sites often rely on appointment scheduling. And what those appointments do is it tells the driver when they should show up. It also tells the warehouse staff when they should expect the driver to start coming to the building and whether they should pre-stage product or not. So on average, if I have to grab 25 pallets, let's say, maybe I should start pre-staging it ahead of the driver's arrival. Well, what we found was they had a leading appointment scheduling platform. Unfortunately, the local staff was using a spreadsheet. So that spreadsheet didn't take into account balancing of appointments. So that was a second issue that was a big red flag. The third one was when drivers arrived, everything was manual. From writing down their information, to writing down their appointment number, to being radioed into where to go, to spreadsheets having to be checked. Ultimately, it was inefficiency on top of inefficiency. That is something we see time and time again anytime we do a site walk. So how do we solve this? It wasn't rocket science, I'll say. There's a couple principles that are absolutely critical. Number one, it's teamwork. You can't be a lone wolf trying to solve for all these issues. Between the guard clerk, the shipping receiving, the warehouse staff, production, corporate procurement, carrier management, you have teams upon teams that have goals that are diametrically opposed to each other. Number two is there's got to be a willingness to change. So in this case, the motivating factor was cost, but you also had employee livelihood, employee sat, driver satisfaction that were key movers as well. How do we go and solve it? Well, we went after the process. So when we think of global logistics, it ultimately comes down to really three things. Number one is people, number two is process, and number three, technology. And so anytime you're using a paper sheet to communicate, we wouldn't really call that technology. Anytime you have people that aren't communicating with others, you're breaking down that channel. How did we go attack it? So we had a 4-step plan to solve this. Number one is cross-functional team. Number two, we had to get to source of truth. What data points actually were reliant? What data points were true? Number three is we leveraged a process improvement methodology. In this case, Lean Six Sigma. It doesn't have to be the only one. And number four, change management. We celebrated the wins. Keep that in mind. At the end of the day, this is change management. This is not technology. This is not process change. This is not a hammer. It's getting buy-in and getting those end users to contribute to the future state that is ultimately what allowed this organization to save money and have happy employees and happy carrier partners as well. So what did we do from a process understanding standpoint? We went and actually did the Gemba walk. The Gemba walk in Lean Six Sigma is getting out to the field, walking the process, seeing those gory details. Let's see the friction points. Let's see the upstream and downstream data that's broken. Let's see how our processes are working today. So what did we do? We started in reverse, and we actually got feedback from the drivers that were on site. We launched a carrier survey, and then we worked backwards into the facility. Remember how I mentioned that the police were called several times? So we went and saw that first. And what we saw is a guard shack that was operating completely manual. Paper, radio, phone calls, having to go walk 50 yards when things weren't right. Then we went into the shipping and receiving team to see what the life was like for the drivers and the shipping and receiving staff. We went into the warehouse, we went into the analytics suite as well. And then we identified every area that had unnecessary friction and room for improvement. Ultimately, what we did is we created a map of how things actually work day in and day out. That was the second step after that. From there, that cross-functional team worked collaboratively to say, all right, what do we need to fix? We have appointment scheduling platforms today, but our staff isn't using it. So we dug into the why, we put a change management plan and a training plan in place, and ultimately we drew up the pecking order of those activities. So what did that allow us to do? All that staff that was chasing ghosts, chasing fires, it now created some immediate bandwidth to focus on process development. So that was a key step in this. From there, once we had appointment scheduling under control, we looked at how carrier management was being done and ultimately how carriers were being communicated to. And what we found is there was a huge disconnect on drop trailer pools. Remember I mentioned earlier that 95% of the loads were being live loaded? They already had dedicated carrier pools, but those carriers kept depleting them for other customers. So ultimately, carrier management and procurement work with each of those carrier managers to fulfill their drop trailer promises. That got us the capacity we needed to take the pressure all off the live loading. From there, we looked at full YMS. So from a yard management standpoint, we included the guard shack, we included the paperwork flow, and it wasn't just for outbound freight. We also included inbound freight. And so that is where a bulk of the opportunity came from a change. But because we had made capacity available by automating the appointment process and ultimately getting warehouse staff freed up and shipping staff freed up by creating the proper balance between live loads and drop loads, it now allowed us the opportunity to go deploy Vector's yard management suite. So future state, what happened is drivers would come in, they were already pre-checked in the facility by connecting to their telematics. They had received their drop instructions or their door instructions. And on inbound load, they were prompted to take pictures of their paperwork. No longer did they have to get out of their truck to go walk into the receiving office to hand that inbound BOL. It was all digital. And on the outbound side, they never had to leave their truck at all, inclusive of getting the paperwork, because that was digital too. So what was the result? It was a 67% reduction in detention fees in year one. I mentioned that that number was over $1.5 million. So a 67% reduction saved over $1 million in 1 year alone. And in year two, it reduced from $500K down to less than $100,000 per year. That is what success looks like. You might ask yourself that's great that you saved a lot of money, but what else did it do? From a labor standpoint, it contributed about 13,000 hours back into drivers being on the road. One of the things that's been well studied in the market is that even though you pay a detention fee, you also pay for it in your freight rate. Carriers have become more sophisticated, so have brokers, and so they build in higher freight rates because they know your site is going to be less efficient. So what we saw is over time is freight rates started to drop. We saw performance improve, and ultimately that overarching goal that we had 10 years ago at this site, shipper of choice, became true again. So you might be wondering, does this apply to me? Does this apply to my organization or my facilities? And the answer is yes. For better or for worse, this problem is not isolated. We see it time and time again. And if you want to know where to start, talk to your carrier partners. It's one of the easiest questions you could ask. Am I a shipper of choice to you? Do your drivers like coming to my facility? How would you stack rank us against your best customers? That's the easiest place to start. Number two is get out in the field. All too often we live in team meetings, in-person meetings. Get out to your site. The next time you're going to do a QBR, do it at one of your sites. Go learn. Walk that process with your team, ask inquisitive questions, empower your staff to drive change. That's one of the most insightful things I can share through 23 years of doing change management globally. As I leave you with a couple thoughts, think of that 1% mindset improvement. If I can constantly improve 1% every minute, every hour, every day, every week, and if you can do that across your entire team, in your entire company, all your suppliers and all your contractors, magical things will happen. Now that you've seen what happens when a multi-billion-dollar company fixes their facility deficiencies specific to detention at its core, it makes you wonder, how do some of the biggest companies in the world actually move product at scale? Click this video here because I break down exactly how Coca-Cola delivers over 2 billion drinks per day all across the world. This is logistics infrastructure at its core.